I'm trying to think of an organic way to approach the topic of legacy games without either you coming off sounding ambivalent about the one that you're currently playing, or me coming off sounding like I'm anticipating my ambivalence about the one I'm going to play.
No, ambivalence is fine. I think that's I don't know. It's the whole board game experience versus quality. There's a lot of games out there that do it. There's games that are rated higher than they actually deserve because they have a little fun experience packed inside them. There's train of thought that experience is the only important thing. So all of those games should be top 10. Because right now, Legacy is fun. I support its existence, but I don't know that it's worthy of a top 5 spot on BGG.
Well, hang on. That's the question then. Honestly, that is the question right there. And that is, which game in the Legacy experience is the top 10 game? Is it game 1? Is it game 10? Or is it the memory of it after you're done and you know you're never going to play it again?
Yeah, that's probably it. And I think that's what I'm seeing in my plays right now of like Pandemic Legacy. Like every game that's super hyped, went into it and we were all like twitching because we're so excited to finally get to do this. Everybody's been talking about it for a year. And we popped it off and we played a game of Pandemic, which was not exactly exciting, right? It's Pandemic. Pandemic is an amazing game. It was a game changer when it came out. No one had ever seen anything like it. So this takes nothing away from Pandemic in the pantheon of important games. However, we've all played it out at this point. There's everybody's played it 100 times. It's a wonderful game, even for people that don't game that are doing that, because it's so easy to kind of lay it out and then, everybody plays with open hands and then it's a team management exercise and you can just walk someone through it. So, I mean, there's a million reasons Pandemic deserves every ounce of fame and accolade that it gets, but we've all done it a million times. And so when you sit down and you crack that box of Legacy open and you're giggity and you get going and you're 6 or 7 turns in and you're just playing Pandemic, it's kind of like, I'm just playing Pandemic. Now to its merit, it does not stay that way for long. So there isn't a full tutorial game. There isn't a full get your feet wet. There isn't a let's teach you how to play Pandemic. I think very wisely they realized that everyone buying this was already, if not a fan, they've had enough exposure to already kind of understand it. Mm-hmm. So the tutorial mode of it does not last long at all. So thankfully it does. You do very quickly get into the Legacy thing of opening a packet and ripping a card in half. It doesn't make you wait 6 games to do that. So that happens and you do get that taste of Legacy pretty quickly. But now that we're 3 games in right now and we've done a few Legacy things and I'm kind of sitting on it going, this is neat, but I'm still playing Pandemic. Mm-hmm. Nothing has actually happened other than maybe make the game a little bit easier because I'm able to think about it as a campaign and not think about it as a game. Yeah. And while technically that is usually pointed to as a reason for a game to become harder because you have to think about game 3 and game 5 and game 9, not just drop this tactical nuke, win, and never look at this again because next week now there's an irradiated zone that I have to deal with for the rest of the game, for this new game. I haven't seen that right now. Like right now I'm just playing Pandemic, and when I unlock a new power, the power that I've unlocked is actually the key to beating this scenario. Because here's a mild spoiler, like the most mildest of spoilers. The whole shtick that I now see, because I haven't played any Legacy games at all. I've only heard about them. I haven't wanted to dive in until I had a group that I knew would complete one. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to do half of one and then just set it aside, not being able to restart it, but not wanting to throw it away because it wasn't done and having just wasted that money. So I've been very, very slow to get on the Legacy boat. But I have unlocked as a mild spoiler the fact that the way this particular Legacy works is that it's giving you a scenario. So it's almost like a video game level where it says, you're going to play a game of Pandemic, but in this game of Pandemic, you have to address this hurdle. Mm-hmm. And what you do is then you go play your normal game of Pandemic and you lose because that hurdle isn't in normal Pandemic. So the 100 games of Pandemic you've played is taken out of the equation. That experience doesn't really work. You know, that's the intentional monkey wrench they've thrown into it. So you play it and then you do really badly and then you go, okay, this went really badly. Why? And it's because the game also gave us this tool that because this tool isn't usually in Pandemic, we didn't use it. So now you play game 2 of that same scenario and you take that tool, and that tool is so easily applied once you've been through the first game and lost that you just kind of walk to victory in the second game. Now, I'm only 3 games in. This could be completely out the window by game 10. But right now, I feel like I'm just playing Pandemic, and I'm playing Pandemic in a way in which I play the level, I lose the level, I open the equipment bag and go, that must be what this new shiny gem is for that we didn't use. I plug it into my sword, and then I slay the boss monster in 5 seconds. That's where I'm at with Pandemic Legacy. Mm-hmm. And the big takeaway from it, how on earth is this the number 5 game on BoardGameGeek right now? Because it's cool, but it's not number 5 game on BoardGameGeek cool.
I don't even know how to grapple with this because, man, 20 minutes ago, I was thinking about legacy games as being very similar to the campaign experience. When you take a game that you know and love with your friends and you play it in a campaign, and this emergent story occurs and things change based on the group dynamics, etc. But the whole time that you were talking, it was making me think back to Risk Legacy, and it was making me think about the parts of Pandemic Legacy that I can sort of read into already without having played it at all. I mean, our box is still in shrink and technically not here yet. What I'm realizing is that the legacy games aren't true campaigns. I'm not really sure how to sort of edge into this without just sort of immediately saying the thing that's going to make everyone yell at me. But
that's good radio, man.
I know. I should let's just wade into this one. But let's back up. Thinking back at the all-time best campaign situations that I've encountered in board games, period, flat out, through the 2 decades that I've been playing board games, most of them were had in 2 very tight situations. The first one is in a game that you wade into, and they just give you this box of tools, and they say, go have an adventure. That's how all of our BattleTech campaigns were. We were the ones that made the campaign. The game just existed. The game was just a mechanism to have it occur. But we were the ones that did it. We created the scenarios. We created the story. We created all the little wrinkles that made it fun. And we reacted to all those wrinkles that we were creating inadvertently, right? We would do something, and then the game would spit back to us this negative consequence because games are rules, and rules do that, right? I mean, they react in opposition to what we try to break. And then that would be the fun of it, was seeing how it broke and then compensating and then sort of bumbling through this. When we did our massive Mordheim campaign, it was the same thing. Like, we were adjusting, we were creating the fun, we were creating all the scenarios, and then weaving those things together as a group and laughing about them and being able to recall them. That was the narrative. We created all that. And the legacy experience is meant to look like that. It's meant to feel like that. But if you really step back from it, it's not that at all. I mean, Risk Legacy, I mean, this isn't a spoiler at all, but it's Risk, okay? Duh, it's in the title. And the legacy part of it is that basically someone's going to get a benefit at the end of every game. Someone's going to get a benefit. And it's up to you as the players to choose who gets that benefit, right? But ultimately what the benefit is up to the game. It's not up to you as the players for the large part. It's, and all those things. And you basically, you're just sort of in this weird sort of reverse democratic way where instead of electing a leader, it's almost like you elect the losers, right? You are determining who's going to get this predefined benefit. That's not really a campaign, and that's not emergent storytelling like what makes the true campaign experience fun. In a weird way, and this is what's going to make people yell at me maybe, but it's almost a campaign experience for people who are really not creative.
Yeah, that's actually, honestly, that was going to be my exact follow-up to what you were saying. is what if that's the thing, is that it's just a, you know what the equivalent is? Here's the equivalency. I don't role play at all. I understand why people do it, and I see the fun in it. Mm-hmm. But as a gamer, to me, it's completely unsatisfying because I don't have fun talking in funny voices so much. I mean, I do. It's a slippery thing. Like I do enjoy talking in funny voices when we're playing Puerto Rico and I start talking like a plantation owner or something, right? You know, so there is those little, as you were saying, in the campaign, the fun of it is player created. That the little taking on the roles and these little asides where we're telling jokes in funny voices. I mean, all that stuff is what makes board gaming great. Like that's what makes it fun. That's what makes hanging out with your friends and everyone laughing and at that kind of stuff is what makes it fun. So, so I do all that. I mean, I get that, but the idea of a open-ended story where it almost like a good RPG group, I think, kind of ends up being a situation where it's like that Whose Line Is It Anyway show, right? Where we're going to play a game where the points don't matter and everybody wins. You know, I mean, I see the value of that, but it doesn't appeal to me. Like I just personally enjoy a story arc. I enjoy starting at this place, working through the game, and having a conclusion, be that a victor with points or be that the story has come to a close. But through all of that, I want a game challenge, having to get through these puzzles and fight these monsters and do my thing. So I don't personally enjoy a situation where we all sit around a table where there's rules in place, but the DM at will doesn't really use them. He rolls his dice for results, looks at them and goes, that's not the result I wanted, and changes it.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff drives me batty, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, that's what the game is designed to do, right? Like, that's what it's supposed to do. But for someone like me, that is a complete waste of time, because if we're going to disregard the rules, why have the rules? If we're going to disregard the die rolls, why roll the dice? I mean, that's just how I am, and it's not right or wrong. It's just what I get enjoyment out of, you know. And my enjoyment of gaming is having a set of rules, having a set of restrictions, and figuring out how to best navigate those, and scoring at the end of the game to see who navigated that puzzle the best. So there's a very big disconnect between me and RPGs. So what that huge digression right there was getting at is, I wonder if the legacy game is for people, as you said, who aren't creative enough to build a narrative in their head. They aren't creative enough to put restrictions on their own games. They're not creative enough to say, well, we have nukes, but if nukes are my first option, then no one can eat food there ever again, so I'm not going to use those nukes.
Yeah.
Whereas someone without that creativity would just go, it's a game, these are nukes, boom, who cares, I win.
Yeah.
And I wonder, you know, if that's what that is, in much the same as for someone like me who gets zero enjoyment out of role-playing, they make Arkham Horror. Mm-hmm. And Arkham Horror is a game with set rules, set dice that matter. It's very cut and dry. You succeed, you fail. You are doing all the things you do in an RPG, right? You're walking into a house, you're drawing a card, you're having a little story, you are making a decision, then you're drawing another card or you're rolling dice to see how the NPC reacts to you, then seeing what benefit or detriment you get from that encounter. And all of this stuff is building toward accumulating stats, accumulating equipment so that you can fight a monster at the end and either and solve the case, banish the monster and win, or do none of those things and lose and laugh about all the foibles that happened that led to that loss, right?
Yeah.
And that, you know, what that is I have an absolute blast playing Arkham Horror. Like, it's amazing. So that is giving me really that RPG experience, that all that stuff that I don't enjoy, I'm getting to enjoy it through the channel of playing it as a board game with rules and strict input outputs, so that I'm getting that RPG flavor but serve to me in a way that I process.
Yeah.
And I wonder, if that's what Legacy is. It's something people that have never ever played, and campaigns are, by their nature, that's in the realm of wargaming. It's, generally the heavier, and I say wargaming because it's usually games that are built around this little conflict, and it doesn't have to necessarily be war, but it's always kind of its own unique thing. Like, here's this book and rule set about how to do this one conflict.
Yeah.
And that's all there is that one conflict. And then fighting for no reason gets dull, even if it's a really interesting exercise. So I think there's a tendency for people that play those types of games, like BattleTech, like Warhammer, any kind of game that's like two sides competing directly for this one thing, or even a race car game, right? Like Formula Day. Formula Day is super fun, one-off race, but it is literally 20 times more fun if you are playing 20 races and keeping standings of your drivers.
Yeah.
So I think all of these games that are one-offs, people realize that it's kind of a shallow experience after 50 games. Start building up these campaign rules to give some narrative, and they do that organically and from their own creativity. And it happens a lot and often in those communities of those types of games. And I wonder, for the third time, as you already said, that if the immense discovery, the immense impact the Legacy games have had is because, we have 50 other styles and types of gaming, and Legacy has taken one of those, being Pandemic, that's a one-off thing that there's no consequence for, and built consequences and built that kind of what would normally have been a homemade campaign experience from people that are creative, and given them that flavor for them to use when they don't normally do that or haven't been exposed to that sort of thing at all.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why it's rocketed up the charts like it has.
One of the big things that you were touching on that I think sockets in perfectly with the point you just made is about where the line is in between something that's fun and organic and exciting and just sort of seems like what the game is, quote unquote, versus something that's entirely contrived. For every player, that's something totally different.
Right.
I mean, circling back, when we did our Mordheim campaign, the majority of us that was in our group that was doing these round-robin tournaments, we were attached to our characters. They were named. We didn't choose their weapons based on math. We choose their weapons based on personality. That was all just made up. And then we had this one guy in the group who, he did everything based on math. He actually rebalanced the game when we found out that shields versus dual wielding was broken. He was the math guy. And it was funny because to him, everything that we were doing was entirely contrived. It was arbitrary. It was completely made up. Whereas to us, what he was doing was equally as contrived, right? It seemed equally as false, right? Because he was just pushing and pulling levers and getting, input, output. And so we would often joke that his war band wasn't like one of the war bands that was sort of had a living history in the city, that every single time that we fought I think he was playing the orcs, every single time we fought his orcs, we would just be like, oh, there's a brand new orc warband. Because that's the way it was. They would come in and be completely new because he did the math differently based on his last game. And it became this joke, right? And we turned it into this funny thing. But what that experience has taught me in hindsight isn't that he was experiencing the campaign as not a campaign. It's to him, the line in between what was contrived and what wasn't was simply different. To him, the organic process had to do with the evolution of stats and strategy, whereas to us, it was all of that combined with this narrative, combined with the growth of characters. And some games show that off better than others. For example, right now, one of the games that I'm playing a campaign in is Galaxy Defenders. And Galaxy Defenders is actually a perfect game to talk about when you're looking at legacy games. Because essentially, yes, Galaxy Defenders is this little tactical game that you can go and it actually is a lot like Pandemic, because if you just turtle and do a game of attrition, you will lose. It's essentially a game of putting out fires. You're running around and putting out fires until you complete the scenario, right? Just like Pandemic is. What makes the game playable in a campaign setting, yes, your characters are growing, they're leveling up, you're getting new equipment, and the enemies are getting more difficult. But fundamentally speaking, it's because they're doling out these new scenarios. And the new scenarios not only have new objectives, which make it interesting, but they bring out new enemies that are more difficult and have bigger hurdles to jump over. By the time that you play the 10, 11, 12 games that are in your campaign, depending on the path you take, you've played the same fundamental game 10, 11, 12 times, but the specific game you've played has been different. And so when you walk away from it, it's kind of the same question that we had about Legacy, and that is, which one of these game experiences do I put the numerical rating on? Is it the first one? Is it the last one? Is it the memory of it? What is it?
Right.
And that becomes really, really difficult. But if you step back even further, right? So step back from Legacy to see that there are lots of games that aren't Legacy games that do the same thing of just doling out scenarios, right? I mean, Claustrophobia does it, right? I mean, pretty much all the dungeon crawls do it for that matter. That's how they exist, is because they're doling out scenarios. War games, just like you say, they trade on this. If that's all it takes to be a Legacy game, well, then we're swimming in them, first off. But second off, if you step back even further, you realize that there are more games that kind of do this as well. I mean, Mice and Mystics, for example, is a game that was really well regarded. People loved it, but everyone also kind of shrugged and said, yeah, I played the campaign. I don't know if I'd play it again, but I had a blast playing the campaign. And it's the same thing. You're just playing through a series of scenarios, and each scenario has a little twist, a little turn, but there may not be a reason to go back through it. And for that matter, you know, when you look at a game like, I mean, we talked about BattleCon. The way you sort of ease into BattleCon is that same way. Every time you play it, maybe you throw in a new twist with the new rule. Now, when you back up from that, you know, talking about like a Legacy game or a campaign game, where you arrive at the end isn't with this great experience. You can say, do you remember the time when we did this and it surprised everybody? What you end up with is a game that you want to play over and over and over because there's tons of complexity and it's designed to be played over and over and over. However, I think that same sort of emergent process exists in a lot of games. And the question is, how do we as gamers evaluate those games that only exist in that emergent process instead of games that exist after the process is over?
Yeah, I think that's really the question. And the full disclosure, again, I'm only 3 games in the pandemic. It may very well be lulling me to sleep so it can hit me with a right cross when I'm not looking, right? just a haymaker is going to come at my face and I'm going to go, oh man, that is the most amazing gaming experience I ever had. 10, right? Clearly has happened to a lot of people. You know, so I think that's a very apt kind of take on it is what are you rating? Because there's up to 24 games to be played. You're going to play between 12 and 24 games. At this point, we are going to be playing between 13 and 24 games. And you're right. Which game do you rate? You know, my criticisms that I have had just talked about are coming from 3 games in. And I think that's useful, as you said when we were, you know, talking about discussing this. Is that it'll be interesting to see how I feel right now, game 3, versus how I'm going to feel at game 19 or wherever we finish. And it's possible that rating will jump up like that. And if it does, quite frankly, I think that'll make my rating even higher, you know, because it surprised me. And this, if nothing else, as longtime gamers, we're all kind of jaded. So any game that kind of hit you with something you did not expect in any way, shape, or form, that always gets bonus points, probably more credit than a game deserves a lot of times, just because it surprised you.
Yeah.
But I mean, as for the rest, I think you're right. Like we have the Legacy game is being touted as a new force, like something that's never been done. And what you've unpacked is not only has it already been done, but the games that do it are tremendously fun, and we play them all the time. And, you know, my list of games, kind of my desert island list, one of those is Combat Commander. Mm. And Combat Commander, while it is not a Legacy game in any way, shape, or form, it is a game that is super dynamic in that you have a set scenario and there's a known objective, like the Allies need to take this bridge, and the Germans are trying to slow them down, so they need to stop them from taking that bridge. That is a scenario that is in 85% of all war games published. Right? I mean, this is not a unique thing. However, the way that game plays out, you have a deck of, I don't know, 100 cards or something? Mm-hmm. And on those cards are 100 unique events and dozens and dozens of little tactical events, of guns jamming, of landmines hitting, of snipers shooting, of heroes, erupting from a trench and suddenly becoming the leader of men. There's all of these amazing twists that happen in every game, and every game is unique. And you can play that take the bridge scenario 10 times and come away with 10 100% completely unique war movies. Mm-hmm. As you look back on it. That narrative is within that game. And even on the larger scope, like the overall narrative, it doesn't need it because that narrative is World War II. And someone who buys into that kind of thing where you build your own narrative, where you're kind of using your imagination to live this little war movie, it's focused on these 10 guys in this squad that you're trying to help take this bridge. When you have that is essentially doing what legacy games are trying to do. And it's done freely, and it's done without conceits or without anything else being trying to force that square peg into that round hole. It just happens organically and naturally. And it's something that, for people that aren't impressed with legacy in the way that we're talking, and the way that right now at the moment I'm not impressed with legacy, that may be because I play games that way already. Even though I don't role play, I do sort of put imagination first when I'm working through these puzzle games. Mm-hmm. When I'm playing Agricola, I'm not doing math.
Yeah.
I am the head of the household going, how do I make this farm grow? How do I feed the kids?
You're running a farm.
And when I play whatever it is, when I play Railways of the World, I am a rail baron. I have this amount of money. How can I capitalize this? How can I freeze out my opponent to protect my investments? I'm in that moment. I am an investor. I'm a stock investor. I'm whatever. I take those. That's why I play games. It lets me do things that I'll never have access to. If it's close enough as far as the theme being carried by the mechanics, I'll have a ton of fun. It doesn't matter win or lose. I'll have amazing stories playing out in my imagination, and I'll have those events that we as a group will sit around and go, hey, remember that time this thing happened, and we'll all laugh about it. And that's really the point of why we do this, right? I think, long story short, TL, too long, didn't read, TLDR. I agree with you that this legacy thing is simply an expression of what one group of gamers feels about gaming being taken and given to people that haven't experienced that and making them go, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah. No, you just said the thing that I was struggling to wrap my head around, honestly. I made the flippant comment earlier, right, that legacy games are ultimately for people who aren't creative. And that's small-minded, right, because people do enjoy them because they are creative and they can see through it. My contention is just that when I think about the process of going through a scenario that only works when you don't know what's coming, I kind of feel like the thing it's trading on is the big reveal, right? And I think that by putting the legacy banner in the name of the game, I mean, it's like going to a Shyamalan film, right? You're sitting there waiting to be excited by the thing that you didn't expect, that you really expected, because let's be honest, that's why you're there. And
you're trying to figure it out the whole time.
Exactly.
You're not focusing on the bad acting. You're not focusing on the bad writing.
Exactly.
I'm going to figure out this twist before he shows me, and I'm going to know, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And then, and that's why his movies don't hold up, right? When you go back and watch them, they're comical because now you know the twist.
Yep.
And now you're focused on all the other ludicrous parts of that. That are awful.
And
so.
That's spot on, right? And so with these legacy games, when you step away from them, right, and you look at the way that you were sort of led one way, and then the rug was pulled out from you, and again, as someone who always looks for the imaginative component in a game, it seems a little bit arbitrary to sort of, okay, let's all go this way together. Oh, wait, hang on, we're going this way just because there was an envelope that neither of us had any understanding of that just said differently, right? I mean, it feels unorganic. It feels contrived. But the confusing part of that is that if that hypothesis is correct, right, that this is a way to hand this creative component of gaming to people that have not seen that, well, then when I look at the BGG Top 100, it should all be abstract games. And it's not. So this idea that Legacy is sort of showing this world of non-creative people creativity obviously has to be incorrect. And that's where I think that the thing that you just said is correct, in that essentially what it's doing is, it's, to make it really specific, it's packaging it up in a way that all the people at the table can interact it from the same point of view and for the same frame of reference without the concerns that at some point it's all going to go off the rails. Because the creative component of it is in the box, right?
Yeah, I'll even take what you just said about the top 100 games being all abstract. I'll take that one step further. I think what we're seeing is that all of these ways of enjoying board gaming and interacting with board gaming are all just kind of niches, right? People who play war games are a niche. People who play Agricola and pretend that they're farmers, they're a niche, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember when Agricola came out, there was significant pushback on Agricola from Euro, like stodgy Euro people that are like, fine, it's resource exchanging, it's somewhat interesting, but it's artificial because, as the game progresses, the turns shrink, the time, everything is kind of falsely manipulated to make it tense.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you start out with like 6 turns to feed your family, and then there's 5 turns to feed your family, and 4 turns, and 3 turns, and 2 turns. And what sense does that make? Why are the years getting shorter? Why is year 1 6 months long, or 6 months long, and year 2 only 4 months long? There was some pushback from really stodgy Euro people as to why this is even a thing. And the tidal wave of popularity that propelled, Uwe Rosenberg into the stratosphere of famous game designers was people like me going, but I'm running a farm. It's so cool. Like I plant weed, and then I harvest twice as much wheat, and I make it into bread, and then I sell the bread, and I get gold, and I buy cows, and the cows I put in a pasture, and I start making more cows. And, all of this periphery stuff that had literally nothing to do with cube pushing and resource exchanging is what made that game huge.
Yeah. And
I kind of wonder, speaking of the top 100, I mean, we're seeing that a lot. Games like Scythe, games like Seven Wonders, games like Pandemic Legacy. These are games that have shot up into the top 20, and every single one of them, there's a community of people that focus on that type of game that go, top 5, this isn't even the top 100 of this style of game. You know what I mean? Like the 4X, like there isn't a 4X person out there that thinks Scythe is amazing.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
There isn't a Civ player that thinks Seven Wonders is the epitome of Civ building games. And again, Pandemic Legacy, from our standpoints of people who play games imaginatively, for lack of a better word, we see that as, it's fine. It's an extension of that. It's cool, but it's just that. It's fine and cool. It's not 5th best game ever made. I think that's the projection, is that these things, these niches, these niche groups, they focus on the thing they focus on because it's the part that makes it great to them. We're taking that little aspect of their culture, for lack of a better word, and projecting that into the people that aren't part of that niche, that look at it and go, oh, that's why those guys do that. This is awesome. Yeah. Even though what's being projected has been watered down so that it can be consumed by those people, right? Because a 4X game is by nature going to be 7 hours long. Well, the people that are voting on the top 100 don't want to play 7-hour board games. However, if Scythe can do it in 2 hours and just kind of vaguely be flavored kind of like a 4X game,
or at least give you the feelings of playing one, right?
Yeah, so those people are like, this is amazing. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, the BGG top 100 used to be the heaviest, and I'm not mad about this. I think this is just a thing that is that when BGG itself in its entirety was niche, the top 100 was a list of the best game in every category, the best game in every flavor or the best game of each niche was what made it. Now, with the hobby having grown so large, I think the BGG Top 100 is a list of best cultural appropriations of all of the niches that exist on BGG. They've taken, take what the wargamers like, boom, here's a distilled version of that just kind of has a light flavoring, what makes that wargame great, and boom, it's in the top 10.
Yeah.
Here's a little flavor of what makes civ building great. Boom, it's in the top 10. So I think maybe that's what's happening with games, or with like Pandemic Legacy being the number 5 game, when so far at least it's nowhere near that.
Man, dadgummit. I think you just solved it, because what we've essentially been saying is, why do games need stories, right? Because we make the stories. I mean, for crying out loud, we played Terraforming Mars the other day, and I spent the whole game making a story about nothing whatsoever to do with Mars, right? It was hilarious. I had a blast, and it ended up working to boot, right? Which I'm still not sure if that was a function of the game being so open, or if I just fell into some sort of a side gambit that only works if no one's paying attention. But whatever. It was fun. It was hilarious. And now every time we play that game, we're going to be watching for that moment where the UN player starts to make a crime cartel, and we know we have to shut them down, right?
Right.
I mean, it's a funny thing, and it's part of why specifically with Pandemic Legacy, I've been wanting to play it. I mean, we're about to play it. But I've been holding off for so long because I've been waiting for the people I trust and who know how I play games to tell me why this particular experience is going to be fun. Because ultimately, if it's just more of the same legacy style of, big reveals and gotcha moments, that's perfectly fine. But it's probably going to leave me wanting more. Because you know what? I mean, I have some 30 or so games of Pandemic Prime under my belt, here at the house, and we're already playing Pandemic Legacy, because one of us is always going to run to the cities on the board that have blown up and caused us to lose the board just in catastrophic ways in games past. I mean, every single time we're playing that game, we're kind of living out our worst case scenarios, I mean, we actually had one of those games where the first series of cards you flip over, boom, the game's over, and there's nothing you could have done about it. I mean, when we sit down to play Pandemic, we're already doing so through that lens of just, how bad it can go. So to me, the board's already changed. When I look at the board, I'm seeing something different than what other people see. But part of that is that I myself get attached to what happens. I kind of get attached to why it happens too. It's less than just mechanics. I mean, I understand mechanically why the things are happening, right? Like, that this particular thing was just bound to happen because of statistics. But it's the stuff that I feel like I had some sort of responsibility for, right? I mean, Galaxy Defenders. Game 1, I processed the game to a point where I realized my units, they're just mechanisms of the game. I'm going to lose some of them. That's part of it. You just got to churn them as need be, accomplish the missions first, move on. If you can keep some of them, great. The unit progression track isn't that long. If I lose a high-level unit, I can just get new units up to speed pretty quickly. Don't treat it like an issue. Then 5 games in, I have this one character that's still with me. And contrary to any of my freedoms as Grand Puppet Master in this little universe, I start feeling compelled to baby him and protect him, right? I'm pulling him back from battle. I'm making sure there's no other, I'm making sure there's always another target that the enemy can, chase before they get to him. It's just because he lasted through so many missions. And in some cases, his lasting through the mission was what made me complete the mission, right? So I just naturally give him this additional importance that has nothing to do with how the game is designed, how it functions, mechanically, or even what that particular character does. This is always just the way I interact with games that I play more than once. With Pandemic Legacy, I'm just curious as to my interaction with it, because Pandemic's already a legacy game to me. I already play it that way. I mean, inadvertently, right?
Yeah.
I mean, my skeptical concern is coming from me wondering about someone trying to hand me an experience that I already make for myself. Are they, being the designer, going to do any better than I could? I mean, they not knowing me, not knowing my games group, how we play, and certainly not knowing what's going to be happening on our board as a result of those specific things, right? But I think what I need to do is I need to step back from it and approach Legacy from the same point of view that I approach other games, and that's to look for what's going to be emergent on top of the intended game. I mean, it's almost legacy in a way, right? I mean, just take the meta.
No,
make it more
I
meta.
don't understand that at all.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, this is all just going to become quantum or something, and maybe I can. Oh, hang on, whoa, wait a minute. Here's what. Oh, Jeff, I've already broken it. So our legacy game is going to be a parallel universe to yours, all right? And at some point, our characters are going to jump back and forth.
I wonder if that would work.
Oh, it's going to happen.
Yeah, no,
by the force of my will, we're going to make it work.
So here's the bad news after this discussion with you. And like I said, this will be interesting. We'll come back and talk about this because I'm curious as if I'm going to change on game 18, right? But from what you just said, my prediction is that you are indeed going to be disappointed in this. And I'm not trying to be a buzzkill. Again, this is a more mild, very, very mild spoiler alert. The character thing that you were just talking about, and for me, my best kind of version of that is XCOM, the video game, right? I build my squad, and they're just dudes. And then something amazing happens in one of the missions about halfway through. And then suddenly, either by happenstance or just my attention focusing harder as I slowly grow attached to these characters, the character will do some amazing thing scenarios in a row. And suddenly, all right, she's my favorite sniper. She's amazing. And then now I'm doing what you said. I'm protecting that character. When things start to go south, I almost throw the red shirts out okay, you guys go here and get eaten. You go here and get eaten because I need to save her. And I end up getting attachments to these characters while I have 35 characters on my XCOM squad at the base, but only 4 of them matter to me, right? So I experienced that exact same thing too. And if this conversation has taught us nothing else, you and I kind of play games the same way as far as that goes. And I think what you're going to find in Pandemic, and this is where I get into minor spoilage, the pattern I've seen so far is here's a challenging hurdle to your normal Pandemic game. And as I give you this challenging hurdle, I will also give you a character that solves that challenging hurdle, right? And the table, when that was given to us, we all went, why would I change characters? This is my character. And so we didn't, right? And as expected, that character was key to solving the scenario. And that's as far as I'm going to get, and hopefully that isn't too much spoilerage for anyone listening, not for you, John, because I don't care about your feelings.
Well, and let's be honest, I think we both know I'm going to forget in 5 minutes anyway.
Right, yeah. I was just kidding. Point made. The idea is, though, that I think what you're going to find is you're going to be presented with the unsolvable puzzle, and then the game's going to give you the new character to play, and you're going to look at the new character and go, I like the old character, and you're going to throw it back in the box, and then you're going to go, I can't beat this scenario without that new character, and you're going to switch it, and you're not going to feel great about it because it's going to feel heavy-handed and just not an organic story. It's going to be the game making the story happen whether you want it to or not. And because you play games like I do, or at least with the attitude I do, I think from what you told me, that is going to make you look at that and you are going to react exactly how you're imagining you're going to react.
I'm really curious because while I think if I was sitting at a table of people like me, I would feel pretty handcuffed by the legacy experience. However, I'm not going to be at a table of people like me. In fact, I'm going to be at a table of people that are very unlike me in terms of how they interact with games. At least I think. I mean, that's my suspicion based on just who signed up and having played games with them. But I think we're going to have to put a pin in this and come back to it later, because what I'm wondering is if this is one of the key points to the popularity of the Legacy experience. I mean, ultimately, if the two of us, you and me, sit down and play Combat Commander, halfway through the game, we've created that story. I mean, I actually remember when we first played Combat Commander, we created this hilarious comedy between the two of us about how your in-place gun, it was just a giant cap gun because it couldn't hit anything. And my guys were just running around, not even trying to get in cover. I mean, it was just this huge joke. And it was this stupid statistical anomaly. You were rolling so poorly, I was rolling so well, but I just pushed the bruise. And we went with it. We made it this wonderful little story until the other shoe fell, and my guys just got totally trapped in a place that they never should have been, assuming they had a competent commander. And it ended up becoming an interesting game that never would have been had I not just thrown caution to the wind and played into the fiction that we were creating and, kept on hoping that you were just going to roll like crap.
And it's a war movie moment, right?
Oh yeah, exactly.
It's defying the odds and crazy things happening.
Yeah, it was, and that was the beautiful part of the game. I mean, now you and I can have that experience. We'd have it all the time. I mean, but we didn't talk before the game and lay out some sort of social contract that says, "Hey, here's how I approach games. Let's try to meet somewhere in the middle so we both can have fun." No, it just happened, and I think it happened because we were just laughing our heads off, and we recognized that we were laughing our heads off. But if you're going to sit down at a game table with people, and this has nothing to do with capabilities, nothing at all, it just has to do with their insertion vector, right, to games and to gaming as a whole. The things that come from their personal history and their frame of reference, and even the way that they sort of solve problems. For people that first embrace mechanism, or in some cases just the win-lose condition, sometimes those little unintuitive cinematic moments are just missed. I mean, and they can seem completely foreign or arbitrary in a bad way. Maybe one of the good things about Legacy and why it has this wide appeal is that you can get people to sign up for it. Even people that may not typically put their toe in the same side of the pool, that you would. And you can all sit down knowing this game is about being surprised. It's about those twists and turns. And we recognize that we're going to solve things tactically in the short term, but we're going to step back from it. And in this longer view, we are going to engage in this experience with the expectation and standpoint of being frustrated and thwarted and watching this play out. And to me, as someone who's always going to find a way to turn any game that I'm playing into something that it has no business being, at all, frankly, and I'm going to enjoy the game for those reasons, it gives a weirdo like me, really, a way to sit down with someone who isn't broken like I am, and may actually look at the way that I play games as just abhorrent or just flat out wrong, and in this really controlled and equal and almost kind of democratic setting, it lets us engage with the parts of the campaign experience that aren't necessarily just on the table, like the ones that are in our brains, right? And it gives us a way to engage with those things on equal footing and come away with having a similar experience without cutting across each other's wake in really negative ways. And maybe that's why this is a good thing, because while this may not be the best campaign experience that I'm ever going to take part in, the likelihood of it being a good campaign experience might be higher than me just picking any random game on the market and plopping it down.
Yeah. At least I think with 4 different people, like a random selection of 4 people.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it, maybe.
Because it might be. I mean, I would, again, not to keep going back to Scythe, but I think it's in a different arena, but I think it runs parallel a lot to this, to where Scythe, again, I don't know where it's at now, probably top 10. I haven't looked in a while. My experience with Scythe was, this is cool. And when I sit down and play that with 4 random people, and they're still friends of mine, but just people that come at that don't enjoy 6-hour 4X games, but point being, I sit down at that table with people who don't play 4X games, and I have a ton of fun. Like, it's a fun game. And then my rating on it, though, is like a 7, 6, whatever. And the reason my rating is low is because when I sit down with someone who plays 4X games, or someone who's familiar with them, or if I sit down and talk to you about this, because I know you play, you have played heavy war games, you have played the Civ games, you're open to those kind of experiences. And when I'm talking to someone who has a similar kind of take or similar experience level, I will say Scythe is really not a great game. That there's a million reasons for me that, like the legacy stuff you were talking about, is kind of ham-handed and forcing you in these directions that, quite frankly, takes away some depth from what you're experiencing. It put handcuffs on you and makes you have this experience whether you want it or not. And I think I can say that about Scythe, being honest, to someone who has a similar proficiency level with 4X games, and they'll understand what I'm saying, while at the same time being able to say to people that don't have that depth of experience, hey, this is fun, and we can play it, and we can talk about it, and it's still going to kind of give us that shared experience. That is speaking to what you just talked about. I think that is the part that you are probably dead on about, that the magic is being able to take that game and take it out of a really critical, jaded niche group, lay it out in front of 4 people from very diverse vectors, and everybody having fun with it. That's probably where the magic is, and why a game like that shoots to the top 100. Top 10. That's the case, maybe.
Yeah. Well, in the end, I think that, at least for me, and I'll go ahead and say this between the two of us on the record, so you can hold me to it later, and that is that I think in the end, after I've played Pandemic Legacy, after I've played Pandemic Legacy, if I come back and I lower my rating for Pandemic proper, then that means that Pandemic Legacy was more than just a good game experience, and it was a good game. If, however, I walk away from it and I go, yeah, that was a fun thing to do, but Pandemic is still just as good, then that means that it was all about the experience. I think that'll be an interesting thing to look at the other end of this. I'm projecting, but looking at it with hindsight, I think that's going to be the core.
Yeah, that's cool. We'll come back to this. It's going to take probably 2 months for us to get through it, and I think in 2 months, Season 2 will be out, so we'll come back and talk about it.
Cool. Done.